So I was curious before that, right? Like before you got an art education, like were you like, was it art always in your life, or did it somehow came together like right before you started your education? How did that happen?
I think I was always drawing when I was a kid. And I think because of the way that where I grew up, and I sort of spent a lot of time entertaining myself. So, drawing seemed like a really immediate thing that I could do. And then I feel like it was a space that I could keep sort of finding interesting because I could keep opening it out. But I always really enjoyed making things, and that included making sort of funny music when I was a teenager, or, being a bit experimental with what I could make was always, for me, a kind of really interesting thing to do.
And do you remember like the artists that while you were studying or maybe before or after that you were really inspired by, who you look up to and you're like, oh my God, this is like incredible. This is something like
I think the thing that was really amazing was when I was a teenager, I went to see, there was this show at the Royal Academy in London that was called German Art in the 20th Century. It was so incredible, and it had so many different artists across the whole of the 20th century, and it included polka and baselitz and Christian Schad, and lots and lots of different artists that at the time I found it really mind-blowing. Just the kind of variety of works I saw in that show, and just the kind of drive and energy I think that I saw in the work. Probably someone like Louise Bourgeois was always like really wonderful, inspiring artist for me.
how did you find, because you work with variety of mediums, and like how did you find like your medium? Because like I know you work a lot like with silk and then the
Mm.
other mediums. How did that happen?
No, I think there was a point in my life which was a massive changing point, which I've sort of I've spoken about a few times, but it was at the point when my husband died, and afterwards, for about a year afterwards, I just couldn't make any work. I just started making really small drawings, and they were very personal, and they were really just to get out the things that were in my head. And
Mhm.
they were on handmade paper or scraps of paper. And then as I made those, I wanted to make something bigger that was, like my drawings, these drawings were quite a sort of new language for me. And I thought, I want to make something bigger, something like a painting, but I want them to have the lightness of drawing. And
Mm.
then using silk for painting seemed a really good equivalent to, when I say drawing, I was drawing with watercolor on paper. So something that was very light and very sort of almost not there
Mm.
seemed a really kind of very appropriate medium for me. And then after that, or maybe around the same time, I was really thinking about how works become physical. So how they're present in the space. So when I made three-dimensional works, I was really thinking about how I could use the language of the drawing, but make it a very sort of physically present thing. And so it had to be very sort of handmade. And that involved sewing and soft materials. And so they were quite natural steps,
Wow.
but it felt like just a way of expanding the sort of language of the work quite naturally, I guess.
I love this like tactile part. I think it's so important also how you can like interact with the work when it's something to your point that's like physical and like in space, and then you can like touch and feel. And how does the work process like how does like the work process look for you? Like a day in the studio, when like do you have already idea when you come in, or is it like sometimes going through your head and then you just like might not
I
work?
try to leave open a space which, for me, it's when I'm making drawings that I can not determine what it is I'm going to make, or I don't know what I'm going to make. I just draw whatever comes to mind. But at the moment, because, I have particular shows that I'm working with, particular spaces, it might be in a museum or an art institution, and I know the space, and I make a plan for, what the idea is and what kind of work or installation I'll make, then it is quite, I do know what it is I'm going to do.
And do you listen like to music while you work, or do you work in silence?
It depends, but sometimes I'm listening to loads of podcasts and people talking and interviews and so on. Other times I'm listening to music, and it really depends how I feel, or how I want to concentrate, or how much energy I want to have, whether that music is quite in the background or whether it's quite sort of a driving force. Just depends how I feel. And sometimes if it is the right music, I'll just play it on repeat because it makes the right atmosphere for making.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's like depends on the mood. I wanted to talk a little bit because you explore this very, and I mean emotions you experience yourself, such as like grief and loss and many
Mm.
others. So how did you find your way through them?
I think at the beginning, because you're right, at the beginning it was about, really was very concentrated on grief and love and loss of love and so on. I think in a way I had no choice, because that was how I felt. That was necessary for me, whether anyone else saw it or not. I had to somehow put all these feelings into the work. And when I'd done that, then I realized that the way I feel and the way I think can always inform the work. So it's almost as if through that process, I found out how to really put my own feelings into the work in a way that really felt authentic to me. And now, if I'm making work, I have to have a sense that I really feel this. It really means something to me and I really feel it. Because if I don't, then I won't believe in it. So it's necessary.
Mm.
And it's actually very, it's something that could seem scary, that you put your real feelings into something outside of you. But it's something that feels, to me, that it makes the work feel very genuine. And that's really important to me.
Yeah, it's kind of brave, I think, when I think about it, that you put yourself out there and then whatever emotions are on the canvas that people can read it. I don't know whether you have this experience or not, but like if you when you talk, I guess I'm sure you do, when like there's an opening and like, people they see how they interact with your work, would you say they often see in the work what you captured, like the emotion that you captured, or is it like different? So say there's like a loss and sadness and they see, I don't know, like perhaps beauty in it or
I mean, I think I'm trying to contain in the work all those kind of different aspects. So, there is a sense of, it can be really tragic, but I at the same time want it to be something that I find beautiful. And what I find when I meet people who see my work is that I'm quite often really struck, or how can I put it? It really touches me when people tell me that the work has some effect on them. It's sort of, they recognize something, or they feel something, or you know, when people really have a reaction to the work, for me, it's something very affecting for me, because it's very important, that somehow I can transmit something to
yeah.
someone else.
That makes sense. It's like a different way of connection, I think, was also because like you resonate with people through the emotions that either both of you experienced or like they also can relate to. And many of your works have this like at least for me, like the way I see it is like mythological, like fairy motifs. They're like almost like fairy tales sometimes. So I was curious, is it by accident or was it something that like that's how you decided to express it,
I
right?
think there are lots of examples of looking at mythic narratives and thinking about how they can be incorporated into the work.
Mm.
But there isn't a kind of, when I was talking about an audience reaction, I don't think about an audience's reaction when I'm making the work. I think about trying to do the thing that I want to convey for myself. And it's the same with using something that might be mythic, or, the look of the work. It's not that I'm attempting to do something to constructed
Mhm.
or too, it's not like I've got a kind of very defined strategy.
Mhm.
It's more that I'm very intuitively putting things together, and it sort of feels right, or it really excites me.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
that's the way I kind of know, oh, that's the right thing to do in the work. And
Yeah.
at the same time, I want to surprise myself, you know? So sometimes I'm looking at the work and I think, I don't know how I sort of arrived at that, but I'm really happy that I did.
That's so interesting because I feel like because it's like some of the, dark emotions that like, or like very sad emotions that we'll experience, they are sort of like put in the way of like, yeah, fairy tale is sort of like the therapeutic effect to it where like you can accept them or like welcome them in a different way. So that's why I wanted to go back a little bit in time where like you were just starting out. Do you remember the moment when you were, because I think it's like when you decide for yourself, okay, I'm an artist, you're getting an education, but then do you remember the moment when you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm an artist?
I had a very creative friend when I was at school, and to me, she seemed to be a very exciting person who was full of ideas. And I remember kind of being a little bit in awe of her and thinking, we were talking about what we wanted to do when we grew up. And I said, I want to be an artist. And I thought, if she says to me, no, I'm going to be an artist, I would think, oh, maybe, it's a bit, I don't know, being an artist would be a bit sort of a grand kind of ambition. And
Mhm.
she said, no, I want to be a tarot reader or an astrologer. And I thought, oh, brilliant. Okay, great. So this thing that I want of being an artist is something that, we've both, this space for both of us.
Mhm.
I don't know why it does. It's sort of silly because it's like a young set of ideas.
I think it's for mating because it's like how it happens usually, right? It goes.
Yeah. But it's like once you've said something out loud, you you recognize for yourself, oh yeah, I that's what I want to be. That's what I want to do. It's almost like saying it out loud to someone was trying it for myself to see whether it sounded right.
Mhm.
And then after that, it's just that's really what I wanted that so much.
Well, it almost sounds like a calling for and for your works, like in say in many, many years, do you have this like either vision or something where you're like, okay, I want to see them in museums or like galleries or like both, like
And there came a point where I felt like I really wanted to see my work in a museum space. And
Mhm.
I remember being offered a show which was in an artist-run space, which was called Caustic Coastal in Salford, which was run by this really dynamic person who's called Dean Brearley. And he ran this artist-run space, and he offered me a show. It was an old warehouse. And I remember thinking to myself, imagine it's a museum, and make the show you'd make for a museum. And actually, that show was a really massive turning point because lots of people went to see it. And even though the space was out of the way, um, I did end up having museum shows from having made that show. And, the thing about showing work in galleries is that you want, even though the work might be very personal and you make it initially for yourself, you want it to meet the world. You want other people to see it. You want it to communicate, so it's really, that part is really important to.
I was curious because I think that the where like life of an artist could be at least like when you look at it from the side, sometimes like maybe not lonely, but like you're by yourself in the studio and like as you're saying, when it's a show, obviously there are like people coming in. So how do you navigate that? Or are you like by nature introverted or rather like extroverted?
I'm kind of a mix, I think, of both. I love being by myself. If I'm by myself making work, I'm really happy.
Mhm.
I really, can be by myself for a long time and be very happy. But when then I go out and I meet people, I remember how much I really like meeting people. you know, it's like I'm a bit of a mix. I think I can be completely introverted, and then, other times I really enjoy being with others, you know.
That's yeah, I think that's how like communicates through your work too. Because I think in one of your interviews you said how you like work with the human stories and like exploring different emotions, and it's probably definitely both of it. I guess like why question, but when you feel like you need an inspiration, I know like you work, obviously have an idea, but you're like, okay, I'm stuck. I need to go to get this. Like, where do you go? Is it like nature, art spaces, research? What is it for you?
It's a combination of things. One thing is like to do something physical, like go for a really long walk.
Mm.
Just get to go away from, not to try to look for something, but just to go away from things and not try too hard. Then ideas sort of come to mind. And then other times it's like I'm sort of really searching. It feels like I'm sort of searching through, like, for example, quite recently I was invited to make work in relation to a subject, to a theme for a show. And although I really liked the theme of the show, I found it really difficult to find my way in that felt really right to me. It took me relatively quite a long time. And I spent a really long time looking through all kinds of different imagery, trying to see, does this interest me, or is it this, or reading or researching? And I read, different kinds of books and searched online and looked at loads of stuff. And I thought, I kind of can't quite get there.
Mm.
But then I think it's a combination of just walking around and not trying too hard
Mm.
made me realize, it's a kind of an idea came to mind that I felt like that is such a great idea that I felt really excited about it. And it was quite left field as an idea. It's quite an odd idea.
Mm.
But it, yeah, that's a time when I felt like I was a bit stuck. And maybe I was tired as well, you know, and I needed a bit of time out and a bit of space to myself, or a bit of space to.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. You're talking about the long walks and the taking a space, like step away from art. Like, what do you do? Like, aside from like works, is there like walks? Like, is there like other things you put yourself into just sometimes to?
I think I love traveling. I love, even if it's not very long journeys, I love going to different places and, exploring places, going to visit places. I think that's really rewarding for me. And I feel like I get a lot out of it. And I even like the part of traveling where, you might be on a train for quite a long time and you're sort of looking, but you're thinking at the same time. I just like that sort of being in movement and going to different places and exploring, And then I really do love walking a lot and a long distance,
Mm.
because it feels like, while your body's moving, your mind is a bit more flexible, maybe.
Oh my God, I can relate so much. I love long walks too. I think it's really
Yeah.
good for your mind. And do you have any like maybe travels that you're like looking forward to that you planned for yourself, or you're like, okay, this is like
This year and through to next year, I've got a lot of different projects. So I am working in Athens, which I only visited for the first time this year, and Copenhagen, which is another place that, it will be, I think, the third time I've been there. And I'm about to go tomorrow, in fact, to Krefeld in Germany and then to Vienna. So at the moment, I have a lot of opportunities to go to different places. And it feels like within, if I'm traveling for work, I always try to make a little bit of time where I can also explore the place a bit and sort of get to see the place a bit more.
that's quite interesting. So when you come to a new place, aside from the work and the work project, like where is the first place you go to?
Usually it's like see what collections there are, what different museums there are, what artworks I haven't seen or I haven't seen in person, what kinds of, yeah, usually the first stop would be to see as many museums or, artworks as I can. Um, and then after that, it's probably just walking around and around places and really trying to get a feel of them. If it's a city, for example, I want to walk all the way around a city and really feel like I got to know it.
get a sense of it, that the vibe. Yeah, I totally understand that. I believe everyone has a sense of a mission or something, like why you're here. So what would you say is your like sense of this mission?
I'm really aware that life is really brief. Life is not really, really long. And because of that, I thought all that my work can do is tell the experience of a life, you know. All it has to do is sort of track the things that become urgent or interesting, or sort of the things that really preoccupy me throughout my life, whatever age I'm at, whatever phase we're in, whatever's happening in the world. All of us are experiencing this period of time. And all my work can do really is trace a life and tell the stories of that life and the thoughts and the feelings that accompany it.
Yeah. Wow. And what would you say keep you going, like as an artist, as a human, like
A sort of curiosity, or the potential to be fascinated by things, or the fact that you can always learn something new, and you haven't had all your experiences yet. You haven't met everyone you're going to meet yet, and you haven't done everything that you could do yet. And that sort of sense of, that there are still things to discover is probably really exciting.